Hey, it's Sam, and I'm making a quick video here about the upcoming Mercury Retrograde that's going to start. Actually, Mercury's going to go stationary retrograde on Monday, December 19th, and it's in Sagittarius. And I'm making this video just to give a sort of update about that Mercury Retrograde. You know, it goes for about three and a half weeks, and this is happening at a very crucial time. You know, what's happening in the U.S. election, in particular, is on the December 19th, this Monday, the electors are voting whether or not to. I mean, they have to cast their election vote for Donald Trump. Now, those of you around the world, or even in the U.S., who might not be aware of this, we have an electoral college. You know, Hillary Clinton won almost 3 million more votes than Donald Trump in the actual election. We have a system which is called the Electoral College, where each state gives delegates. So someone can win the popular vote, like Hillary Clinton, frankly by a lot, almost 2%, and still not be president because of the delegates given out through the Electoral College through each state. But what this means, it's not automatic. The Electoral College was designed mainly to prevent someone who is grossly unqualified to rising and becoming president. It was written by Alexander Hamilton. It was put in the Constitution, actually the Federalist Papers, by Alexander Hamilton. Later it found its way into the Constitution as well. And it's to prevent someone who is grossly unqualified, who is a demagogue, who is an agent of another country, from being president. And so, especially since Donald Trump hasn't ever held office, there's been so many now really troubling signals that many are, you know, there's really quite a movement to perhaps not, or to convince these electors to not cast their vote for him, which is perfectly within their right. And in fact, it's their duty. This is part of the electoral process. There is nothing amiss if these electors decide not to cast their vote for Trump. They're not bound in most states. None of the delegates in the Electoral College are legally bound to vote for the candidate who won from their state, the Republican or the Democrat. But the way it's set up is usually you will have those delegates meet on December 19th this year, the day that Mercury goes retrograde, and they will cast a vote for whichever candidate won their state. If it was the Republican state, like for instance Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, went for Donald Trump, that's why he won the Electoral College. Those Republican delegates are supposed to cast their vote for Donald Trump, but they're not legally bound to do that. Same with the Democrats. So there's a movement afoot to implore 38 of these Republican delegates to not cast the vote for Donald Trump. If that happens, he will not win the Electoral College. And again, this was put into the system. This is part of the Electoral College. If you're going to say that the Electoral College is good, then you have to see the Electoral College process all the way through, which is the electors have to vote. So you can say it's fair, or it's unfair, or whatever. That is the system that we have. But it doesn't just mean that you win the Electoral College on election night. It means then the electors go vote. That's what the provision is for. To stop, it's a safeguard, it's a firewall between a stupid electorate voting somebody into office who's unfit. And the electors are there to be a firewall to say, wait a second, this guy's totally unqualified. So there's a strong movement afoot to implore these delegates to not vote for Donald Trump. And it coincides with Mercury retrograde on Monday, Mercury stationary retrograde. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to have these electors, that you're going to have enough electors not vote for Trump. But what I am going to say is that it's an interesting coincidence that the day Mercury goes retrograde, and retrograde is about reversing something, the delegates meet, the electors meet. So on from something, moving on from politics, it's Mercury is going retrograde in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter right now is in Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. So this is called an exchange. It's called a parivartana yoga. That's the Sanskrit word. And when planets exchange, they actually work together. They actually cooperate and work together to fulfill the common agenda, and find common ground even in the midst of where they differ. So when Mercury's in Sagittarius, it's in a sign where our relationship with language and details which is Mercury, is very inspirational and fiery and can be exaggerated, for lack of a simpler way to put it. One of the issues, the problems with Mercury in Jupiter-ruled signs, which includes Pisces and Sagittarius, is they're ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is very big and wants things big, right? And Mercury is actually about precision, not grandeur, okay? There's nothing good when someone is just exaggerating all the time and sort of bloviating, and you, after a while, you don't pay attention to what they say because they're not being precise. Language is something that we want to be correct and accurate. When someone's just saying what they think you want to hear, even if it's for your own good, after a while you don't trust them. So we don't trust language that is distorted one way or the other. This is one of the problems of Mercury in Sagittarius, is our speech, our approach to details can be conflated and put in this realm of like hopeful thinking. And so it can lack precision. One of the benefits, and often when you get Mercury and Jupiter interacting through their different signs, is it can unite those details and that precision of Mercury, which can also be a little bit dry and sterile at times, kind of, a little too clinical or a little too sort of antiseptic, and it puts it in a realm that is hopeful and optimistic and expansive and connected. So it takes the details and connects them with the bigger picture. But again, in connecting the details, like let's say, for example, the words you speak, which are just one detail after the next, and you want them to be precise, and you put them in an area that's exaggerated or conflated, then it can just have someone, like let's say, again, you ask a question, and instead of giving the precise answer, it's the answer that I think is going to make you feel good, or that's going to make you hopeful, rather than the truth. So this is sort of a range of activity and of psychology and ideology of Mercury and Sagittarius. And it's because it's those qualities of Jupiter. But when we get the exchange, and for instance Jupiter is now in Virgo, where that hopeful, that hope and that desire for meaning and purpose and truth is in Virgo, which is very detailed and very precise and very measured and contained by the hard facts. In Virgo, we want the cold facts, we want the hard facts, we want to see how things are really put together. Whether we like it or not, we want to see, all of the ducks lined up in a row. So again, that's not so hopeful for Jupiter, who wants to just have everything be big and all the details will work out. So these two things can come together right now. You can notice this in your life. It's very good for study. It's been good for spiritual study and scriptural study and all of that for the last several weeks since Mercury went into Sagittarius. In my classes, in my courses and whatnot, students have been making some great progress because of this Mercury-Jupiter exchange. So rather than having Jupiter and Virgo where they kind of what was happening maybe a few weeks ago or whatever, there's a tendency of like, oh, this isn't so hopeful and fun anymore because I got to do all this detailed, practical, precise work, right? Which is Virgo, which is Jupiter getting hung up in Virgo. But then Mercury goes into Sagittarius, and then it's like, oh, now I'm ready to reconnect those details with something that's inspiring. So now all of this unfun Virgo bean counting energy that's pulling down my hype, that's pulling down my vibe, that's pulling down all that inspiration, is now getting modified by the Mercury, which is all the details, wanting to connect with the bigger picture. So this is why the exchanges are good, because they're in each other's signs now, and notice that in your life as well. So when the planet goes retrograde, though, we reflect on it. So we reflect on that energy. We're going to be reflecting on Mercury energy and really carefully considering if those things that inspire us, or those things that we were hopeful about, those things that we had hoped would be, that we hoped we would learn, or that we hoped would inspire us, are actually doing that. And we can reflect on them. We can reflect on the details of that, the literal details, and reorganize it. Reorganize our mind, reorganize our expectations, you might say. One of the biggest problems with Jupiter themes, Sagittarius themes, Pisces themes, that hang us up is expectations. Because we have a lot of hope, we can have some disappointments and expectations. People start off on something, and often, like when they want to learn something, or they want to, like let's say, let's use the election again. We just had an election. We're hopeful about something. People were hopeful, let's say about Trump, or some people were hopeful about Hillary, or, but we were hopeful about it, and now we start to see, oh, this is not what I thought, right? Or let's say someone starts a class, or they start something, and then work sets in. It starts to be hard work. So we need to reevaluate our disappointments and reassess our preconceptions. That's a good thing now. And connect them to the facts, the details. And one of the main skills that really comes about when Mercury goes retrograde is the function of listening. We like to talk. We think that communication is talking. Right, I'm communicating. Well, communication is actually listening also. If you're doing all the talking, you're probably not communicating. You might be doing a lot of talking, but you're not doing a lot of learning, a lot of input. So again, that helps you communicate also internally with your preconceptions and what you think is happening, and then what's actually happening. And again, it's also where you can communicate with different parts of your own mind and consciousness. So when Mercury goes retrograde, that externalizing of details, language, becomes inhibited and becomes a reflective function. So we start to reflect on all the details in our life, and we start to evaluate, like in this case, because it's Sagittarius, things that inspire us and things that motivate us, evaluate our disappointments, our childish hopes, evaluate those things that we believed in and whether or not they actually make sense rationally, and evaluate where we became sort of dogmatic about things. Now we need to reflect and become more practical. So, like I described at the beginning of the video, it's very interesting that the electors are meeting on Monday to decide whether or not to actually cast their vote for Trump. After they do, after Monday, if they do, which usually they do, it would be certainly not unprecedented. There's been two other times in history where the Electoral College did not ratify the one who prevailed in the Electoral College vote. If there's ever been a time when they could go against the vote, it would be now, because Trump, inexperienced, we're already seeing so many pitfalls and potential minefields. Not just very simply even his business conflicts of interest like crazy. He's already shown that he doesn't believe the intelligence. He still just believes his own mind and conspiracy theories. You can also see he's trying to do better. I made a video not too long ago, right after the election, about Trump is now in Jupiter Dasha, so you can see he's trying to do better with, stepping into, a higher octave where he's not just mindlessly ranting on Twitter. He still is doing a fair share of it, more than a president needs to do. It's incredibly arbitrary. He's got plenty of time to, go on Twitter rants against Alec Baldwin, but yet he doesn't feel like he needs daily briefings of intelligence, which is changing. He doesn't believe the intelligence if it doesn't serve his, if it doesn't tell him what he wants to hear, because intelligence, shows undoubtedly that Russia was involved in hacking and perhaps even trying to get him elected because he doesn't like the way that sounds. He says there's no proof. Well, of course there's proof, and he's been shown the proof, but he doesn't want to believe it. And if you're asking me how do I know it's proof, listen, I would know how to probably read that forensic information. It's not hard to see hacking, especially some of the hacking which were phishing schemes, which they weren't even deep web hacks. So our government knows pretty well this kind of stuff. This isn't even difficult intelligence. The kind of forensic evidence and that it takes to be able to find where hacks come from. You just reverse engineer the hack and you can see where it comes from on the deep web. It doesn't mean that you can find the individual, but one of the easiest things is the country. So anyway, without getting into all of that, so to have a president not trust the intelligence there are so many things that just look. If there's ever a situation where electors would say, okay, this ain't gonna work, this would be it. You're seeing a lot of people coming out, there's even like a bunch of Hollywood celebrities, and you're seeing some electors already defecting, much more so. You didn't even have this back when George Bush in 2000, when the Electoral College was so close and George Bush lost the popular vote. You didn't see such outrage. Again, there's so much here. So let's see what happens. I'm not making the prediction that it's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me that there'd be some kind of reversal. Even if he does get the Electoral College votes, which I'm thinking he probably will, what we're going to be seeing is a sort of major reversal, I think, in focus. We might see something pretty surprising, because if you believe one of the most popular charts of the United States, it has a Sagittarius ascendant, which I haven't rectified it myself. I haven't looked enough, but it does track pretty well with the Sagittarius rising on July 4, 1776, but it's hard to know for certain. But it does make sense, and if that's the case, then then Mercury's going retrograde in the first house of the U.S. chart, which is actually the country. So this reversal of information, look for the next several weeks, starting Monday, December 19th, where there could be a reversal of previously held, previous sort of position that the U.S. has. It could be in several different, there are several different possibilities. One, of course, is that Trump doesn't that he doesn't cross the Electoral College threshold. Not sure I think that's going to happen, but it's interesting how it's being talked about. So anyway, besides that, how it could play out in your life, like I said, a good time to reflect evaluate what inspires you, how connected you are to that, and how those inspirations literally work, the sort of nuts and bolts and mechanics and structure of what you believe in, and also how you communicate, not just the words you say. Are they accurate? Are they precise? Are they distorted? Are you exaggerating too much? And what happens as a result? How much do you listen? How much are you listening to what people say, not just saying what you think? Retrograde is a good time for listening, reflecting, and let's see how much listening and reflecting and adjusting will happen in our country over the next several weeks, starting next week. I think we're going to see, even if Trump gets the Electoral College votes, you're going to start to see a coalescing, perhaps, of both parties around the unacceptability of his conflicts of interest, his unwillingness to follow the the intelligence briefings, his like coziness with Russia. He seems to diss everybody except Russia. He's never said an unkind word about Putin. And again, regardless of what you think of Putin, he's, the things that are happening in Syria and his conflicts of interest and his aggressions in Crimea and all kinds of things that make it at least an ambiguous, adversary. He's not an ally. And so I think you're gonna see a reversal, even perhaps of some Republicans, where Trump's going to have to really answer for this kind of stuff as we get closer to the inauguration or to his swearing in. And that's going to take place during that Mercury retrograde cycle for about 3.5 weeks into the middle of January. So anyway, this has been about 20-some minutes, so I don't want to keep going. But interesting update on Mercury retrograde and how it could affect into next year, especially with the U.S. political situation, and reversals of, waiting to see, because it's been, especially like with Trump, well, let's wait and see. Well, now we've seen. It's been 5 or 6 weeks. He's made a lot of cabinet picks. A lot of them are raising a lot of eyebrows. Exxon chairman as Secretary of State, who wants nothing more than to lift the sanctions on Russia so he can sell them oil. Conflicts of interest everywhere. Conflicts of interest with Trump's business, his kids sitting in on meetings, and I think we're gonna see as this Mercury retrograde keeps going, if he crosses the threshold and gets the Electoral College, you're gonna start to see some major squawking from both parties, and including his own party as well. They're going to start to reverse their, okay, let's make sure everything's okay. I think that could certainly happen. Let's see. Some unexpected twists and turns could be around the corner on the political scale with Mercury going retrograde in the first house of the U.S. chart.